Yo, what's up, baby? It's Fordee, and so they say third time's a charm. This is the third time attempting to record the tutorial. The first time I had a problem with the memory card. I didn't realize that the 256 gig memory card was a no-go, and I thought it was recording halfway through. I checked because my monitor ran out, and it wasn't. So that was the first time. Second time, I had an audio issue, and so now we're in the third time. Let's get going, right? So here's the sketch. I don't know, can you see? Let's see. This is the sketch. I will provide a link that you can download. So if you want, you can use the sketch. You can put with pencil on the back of the paper and then draw with a pen or pencil on top of the paper, and it will transfer the graphite marks to your canvas board or canvas. However, keep in mind, this is quite small. You may have to blow it up. Or maybe I'll blow it up before I put it online. So anyway, this is the sketch. I'm gonna move that to the side. I'm gonna show you this journey, right? I started with the idea. Let's see. This was the idea, right? And after I did that, I said, okay, I'm gonna record a tutorial for it. This is when the memory card screwed up, and this is what I did. Then I gave you guys a chance to vote on the two. You guys voted for this one. And I more or less did it with a few tiny changes, and this is what I came up with yesterday. With the audio problem. So we're gonna recreate it. We're gonna change some minute things, but more or less we're gonna go for that. This is an 8x10 canvas board. I'm gonna take an X-Acto blade. I'm gonna score the back. I'm not cutting deep. Let me turn my phone off. There we go. I didn't cut deep just because I don't want to cut into the canvas board itself. So be careful. You don't have to use a canvas board. You can use the canvas. If you like, but we are going to use a canvas board. The first thing we want to do is lay down a background, right? This is pre-primed. If your canvas is not pre-primed, you may want to prime it. I'm going to use this pretty purple, right? It is a fully opaque color. You can see on the label, this fully shaded in box means it's fully opaque, meaning that it is not transparent. I'm going to put a little bit on this little palette right here. I have two things of water here, right? I have a big thing of water. This is to wash my brushes. This is just to get water on my brushes if I need. I also have a spray bottle here with some water in it if I want to spray the canvas. I don't think we're going to need it for this round. I've got some paper towels right here, ready to go, ready to be used. Let me grab a trash can, actually. Alright, so now I got a trash can next to me so I can throw the paper towels away. I've got a few brushes here. We're going to start off. This is a 1/2-inch brush, right? You don't have to use this. You can use a smaller brush if you want. It will just take more time. You could use a bigger brush too. The idea is that we're just going to put this purple color. I'm just going to get a little bit of water on my brush, wipe off the excess on the side of my container right here. I'm going to take this and boom, just start laying some color down, right? Now, I'm not going for perfection. I just want to cover this in more or less purple, right? I'm not worried about brush marks either because we're going to layer this background up. If I was worried about brush marks, then I would be careful with how much water I put on the brush. I would be careful about how I'm making the brush marks, how many times I go over a certain area. But again, I don't even have to worry about getting the edges here that much because the reality is we're going to paint a black border, right? So I'm going to turn it around right here. And I got to remember to look at the monitor to make sure I'm staying in frame. So more or less, we're going to do something like this, right? Now, when that's done, this is acrylic paint. If I let it dry notice there's some whites here. It's okay. I'm not worried about that, right? I'm going to put this brush inside the water, swirl it around a little bit. Boom. We'll leave it there. I have a heat gun here. Let me make sure the power strip's on. You don't need a heat gun, but because we're doing this tutorial, I don't want to wait 15-20 minutes for this paint to dry. So I'm going to use a heat gun. Ooh. So be careful. If you use a heat gun, those things are hot. If you touch yourself with the tip, even when you turn it off, that tip is still hot, right? So we can check to see if this is dry. Usually if you see any glistening part of paint, it's still wet. Maybe right here actually. So if I tap with my finger, nah. And the only reason that this matters is because I'm going to use a Posca marker which is an acrylic marker, to put over this, and if it's wet, the tip is going to pick up the paint, right? So that's why I wanted it to be fully dry. You could see yesterday the tip picked up a little bit of paint. It's fine. You can wipe it with a paper towel, etc., etc. So what I'm gonna do here, or real quick, this is a Posca PC 17K. It's quite large. It doesn't need to be this big. I should be using one in between this size and in this size, but instead of getting up to look for that one, we're just gonna use this. I'll use the corner of it, and I'm gonna write the word COVID-19 repeatedly on this canvas, right? So let's start here. COVID-19. We'll repeat COVID. Now we didn't have space for 19, so I'll come over here and write 19. You write this however you want, with style, without, any type of character type. COVID-19, then we go CO, then VID. This is a background. It's gonna be abstractish, so it doesn't matter. We're not going for perfection. COVID. We'll come down here, we'll put the 19, then COVID 19. Boom. So this marker will dry quite quick, but let's go ahead and hit it with the heat gun to make sure it's dry before we move forward. All right. Next thing that we are going to do is we are going to hit this with some, I don't know if blood splatter is the right word, but we're going to take some red paint, put it on our palette. Just a little bit is needed, maybe even less than that. I have a angle tip brush, right? This one actually is getting worn out, but whatever. I have an angle tip brush. We're gonna use that to create these blood splatters, if you will. We're gonna go over this with a wash of brown made with using a yellow and purple paint to provide some kind of color symmetry, right? We've decided that we're going to make the virus guy yellow, and yellow with purple makes either an olive greenish or a brownish color, depending on how much of one color you mix, etc. So color symmetry is important. That means that your painting is gonna look correct, right? The colors are gonna flow together. Now sometimes you don't want to do that. In this particular case, we do. So I'm just going to dab this brush in here. Sometimes it's good to have a paper towel. We can just dab the brush on the paper towel, remove the excess, come back here, pick up some paint, fill up the brush, right? Come back here, and we can wipe it on the canvas, boom. Now we've got paint on this brush, there's water, it might be a little diluted, but that's okay. All we're going to do is we're going to come in here, and no rhyme or reason. I'm just like, pop, 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 dab, 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 dab. Pick up some more paint, dab, 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 dab. And what we want to do is we want to put some spots. I don't know what kind of pattern that you want to put. It doesn't really matter, right? We're just making these randomized splatters, right? We're not going for perfection. Move your brush around. Have fun with it. You can hold the brush loose, right? You could just that. Maybe some here. And again, we're going to go over this with a wash. And yeah, so I'm going to bring this in this particular water, smush, we'll wipe it around. We're going to try to remove some of that red paint, drop the brush in there, boom. Next, we want to dry it. We're going to hit it with that brown wash, right? All right, some important things to note. Remember I said this thing is still hot. If I touch it right now, I'll for sure burn myself. Depending on how thick the paint is, like I don't know if you can see right here. Let's pick this up. If you can see right here where my finger is, let me see. There is like a little bump of paint. That may not be dry. In fact, we can check by taking a paper towel and dabbing it there, and you see this little mark it left on the paper towel. That means it was not dry. Obviously, thicker amount of paint, longer time to dry. The heat gun basically removes the moisture from the paint and allows it to dry quicker. However, it dries differently than it would if it dried naturally with a heat gun. I prefer the way it dries naturally usually, but for this tutorial to move things along, I'm using a heat gun. Now keep in mind, these heat guns are not very expensive. You can get one, easy to use. If you ever want to move quicker when you're using acrylic paints, heat gun's great. Don't leave it in one spot too long because you can easily burn the paint, which will cause fumes that you do not want to breathe in, etc., etc. There are certain places where there are little bumps of paint. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this paper towel and I'm just going to press down in certain places to try to remove some of it, right? It's okay. I don't even care if I take this paint and replace it when I'm pressing, because this is abstract, right? If you weren't going for something abstractish, then you would definitely not do that. So, okay, here we are. We've got the background, we've got some purple, we've got the words, we've got some blood spatter. Let's put a wash. A wash is a thin layer of paint, right? So I have some yellow right here. I'm gonna put it here next to the purple. Just a little is needed because, again, what we're gonna do is dilute this paint quite a bit with water, right? So actually, I'm gonna take the 1/2-inch brush. I'll come in here, I'll try to remove the excess water. I'll take this paper towel, I'll squeeze off some of this purple paint. Now, it doesn't matter to me that there's purple paint on this brush because we're gonna mix purple paint with yellow paint anyway. So I'll take some of this yellow, put it right here, grab some of the purple. We're mixing it here on our palette, maybe a little more purple. Something like that. This is like between like a brownish greenish, yeah. Anyway, we're gonna pick up a little bit of water in this brush, mix it into the paint that we just mixed. A little bit more, bam. Now, when we paint on this, we're not trying to cover the whole thing. All I'm trying to do is to give it this swash of brown in different spots and leave some of this purple to shine through, because that will allow to give, that will make it look more textured, right? The more layers that we can see that was worked on, I think the prettier it's gonna look. You might say it's getting a little muddy right now, but remember, this background is not the primary focal point. Maybe I'm talking too fast. You know, that's the one thing that is interesting. I need to find a rhythm with this. Obviously, this is the 3rd time attempting this tutorial, but what I need to figure out is to talk at the right speed while I'm doing this. Make sure I keep talking, right? Because long silent gaps of me just painting will be boring. I thought about even ad-libbing the me talking after the fact, but I thought it would not sound natural. So I decided against that. I'm putting my brush back here in the water to clean it up, leaving it, that's fine. As long as it's submerged in the water, the paint won't dry on the bristles and the brush will not go bad. If I leave this brush sitting out, right, and it dries with paint on the bristles, you're gonna ruin your brush, right? And depending on how expensive the brush will determine how upset you are, right? All right, so here we are. This is what we've got so far. It's looking cool because this wash is quite diluted. We are going to dry it quickly with the heat gun, and it would dry quickly anyway because the less amount of pigment of paint, the quicker it's going to dry, right? All right, so it's important that this is dry. Don't do what I'm doing right now by tapping this board with your hand. However, if I tap down and I lift straight up, the chances of me smudging anything are pretty slim, but I wanna make sure that this is dry, especially in the corners because we're gonna make the black border. In order to do so, I have painter's tape here, right? The blue one from 3M works quite well. If you buy it in bulk, then it is cheaper, but this stuff is not cheap. I go through a lot of it, and it will give me clean edges for a border here. So I'm gonna measure just by eye. You could use a ruler to make sure that I'm a certain, like let's say 1 centimeter away from the edge, or you could just eye it. And again, it doesn't have to be 1 centimeter, and it doesn't have to be perfect. Because remember, the little human error or mistakes that happen in your painting make it look like it was done by a human, which is the whole thing that's cool about a painting, is that it wasn't done by a computer. You did this by hand, right? And so what I'm doing here, I'm not even going all the way across. I want to come up, well, okay, so it looks like we need to do something right here. Add some more tape. The reason I'm doing that, and see, this is even curved a little, but that's okay. We're not worried about these silly little things. I ended up wasting that tape. That's not good. It's a little curve right there. I'm not worried about it. That means this line is not going to be perfectly straight. It's going to curve a little bit at the end, but that's okay, right? Again, I'm trying to make it roughly about the same distance all around the thing. It's a little bit thicker here than it is here. Who cares, right? It's still gonna be gorgeous. It's still gonna be beautiful. So, do the same thing up here. Find somewhere that looks relatively okay. And again, you can measure this so it's perfect, but I'm doing it by eye. Now this next part, I'm gonna use an X-Acto blade on a canvas board. I do it on canvases too. This requires a delicate touch. It takes time to understand the amount of pressure that you should put on one or the other in order to score the tape without scoring the canvas, right? I didn't cut the canvas, I just cut the tape. This takes practice. Obviously, another thing you could do is rip it. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is just something I'm noting, that if you decide to use an X-Acto blade, do not press too hard. In fact, if you press and you realize when I pull right here, I didn't cut the tape, that's fine. Do it lightly again. Better than doing it hard, cutting through, and then you have a hole in the canvas board or your canvas, right? And as with everything, these kind of things, with practice, you get better, right? So, let's see. And again, I don't know how well you can see here, but that is quite, it's crooked, right? But again, like I said, that's okay. We're not worried about exact perfection. We are worried that this flows properly with how we feel and the emotions we're trying to give. And this is about the virus who's causing damage in people's lives, who's throwing unbalance, right? And so the imbalance in this piece can signify the imbalance that COVID has given to all of us, right? So this black paint is almost out, actually. I'll have more, but let's try to use all the paint in this tube. So we've got that. Next, I'm going to take the 1/2-inch brush. It's easier to use for this, excuse me. Take off the excess water. Now, something to note, black paint is very opaque. It's not translucent. It will overpower every other color. So I'm not worried if there's a little bit of color on this brush, right? So I'm gonna come here, I'm gonna dab it a few times, then I'm gonna come down, and we're trying to work it in next to the tape right there. Now, on the side, if I hold this, I can come and I can hit the side, right? We're going to hit it with the heat gun to dry it quickly, and I'm going to do this all while holding this in my hand so I don't have to dry one side after I do it so it doesn't touch the table and blah, blah, blah. So, as I come here, boom, I've got this side, and I'll turn it to the side. I'll get the edge. Now, if this was going to go in a frame, it wouldn't be as important to hit that edge, but I think your work should be clean, and so I would always try to do it. So again, just painting the side or this part of this frame, then we'll come, I guess this is the side, the other part's the edge, I don't know. So boom. And I'm also trying not to put too much paint. Now, like when I grab this, my goal is not to get paint on my hands, but for sure I probably will. And that's okay, right? I have paint on my table, I have paint on my clothes. It just means that I'm working. All right, so obviously I think when you paint, if you're worried about getting paint on stuff, then you should definitely wear clothes that you don't mind getting dirty. Especially in the beginning, I think that will happen just because. And for me, it happens just because I don't let that slow me down. I want my creativity to be flowing. I don't want to worry about whether I got paint on something. I can always change clothes or replace them or whatever. But sometimes that moment of creativity, I need to work it in its best moment, right? Throw this piece of tape that was on my hand. Grab the heat gun without burning myself, because I'm using one hand while I'm holding this. And let's hit this with the heat gun, try to dry the black tape. So, if we were worried about perfection, maybe we'd say, you know, there's a little white right here on the edge. It's very little, but maybe you go back and hit it. I don't know. As far as is this dry, we can tap it to check. There's a little bit, but this paint that's wet is on the tape, so that's fine. I think we can now peel this tape up. If you peel the tape straight up like this, there's a bigger chance you ruin the edge. So if you peel at it at an angle, you see how I'm pulling like in an angle? Then there's a less chance that you disrupt the edge from where the tape is taped, right? Just a little tip / trick. Pull at an angle when removing painter's tape. You can see right there, I'll show you in a second, it did lift a little bit of this tape right here, right? So that's part of the marker. That's why it looks white right there. But yeah, lifted a little bit right there. Which, hey, you know what? It's okay. What did Bob Ross say? Happy little accidents, right? It makes our paintings and our creations look more human. And I think, well, probably I should turn this as I'm scraping paint with my fingernail. That's not good. And We're gonna have to make sure we cover that with something. I don't know why it's not picking up, huh? There we go. Pull it at an angle. Oof. And we picked up the paint there. So maybe I will actually fix this. If you see, we picked up paint right there. We're not being that careful, to be honest, but still. So grab this tape. Pick that. There we go. So before I fix that, let's do the other line, right? Because we still got this brush, it's sitting here with paint on it. Let's make that happen. So again, I did this by eye. What I did is I looked for a certain distance from this corner to this corner up and also down. And then I tried to replicate on both sides so the line is even thickness, right? I'm not wrapping the tape around because I'm going to lift it pretty soon anyway. And I think I didn't pull enough tape. No, I did. All right. So maybe right. Something like that. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect. If it's a little thicker on one side, who cares? So now we're going to take this black paint. We're going to just put a little bit of water so it moves faster. Boom. And we're going to slide this. I'm going to pick this up so I can hit the side without worrying about getting the table. Even though I'm sure I'm getting paint on the table. Be careful with your workspace if you're worried about it. I could have put a tarp down underneath this. My table has tons of paint on it anyway. And probably one day I will sand it down and paint this table with some design anyway. So I'm not that worried. So here we go. I'm going to drop this paint in this bucket of water, swirl it around. It's making this water quite dirty. We may want to change that at some point. Let me go ahead and remove this tape now. There we go. And here. All right. So one way we can fix this is I have these Posca markers right here, which are acrylic markers, is we could just come right here, and the black color is not going to be exact, but I don't think anyone will notice that, especially if we varnish this, because that will be like the glue that creates the right contrast and should make it all glue together, if you will. All right, so here we go, right? We are getting close. If we look at the two right here, we have, this is where we're at now. Only thing we need to do here is add the 19, add the virus guy, and sign it, and we'll be done, right? So let's talk about the 19. The way I did the 19, we need to dry this, is I used one of these street dabbers. These street dabbers are graffiti markers, right? They're used in graffiti. You squeeze them and a bunch of ink comes out, allows it to drip. However, I don't do graffiti anymore. This is just purely for this, for artistic effects, right? So let's see, I think I'm gonna use the blue one. You gotta make sure that you shake it up. Also, this needs to be dry, so let's make sure that we dry this. I think I said, if you touch the tip, will burn you, but also this thing is really hot. It puts out a lot of heat, so if you put the heat towards you, you could also burn you. So be careful with heat guns, right? Not that I haven't burned myself. We wanna make sure that this is dry. I'm gonna tap here, and it's not. So that's good that we checked. Oh. Something else to point out, this heat gun is quite hot, right? It's gonna dry the paint over here if it directs at it, so you gotta be careful. So, I think this should probably be dry. Let's take a finger that doesn't have paint on it and see. Yes, oof. Now this is quite warm. It's also gonna make this canvas board warp a tad, but that's fine. We're gonna shake this up, right? And I'm gonna have a paper towel ready because I'm gonna let it drip on its own, and I'm gonna tilt this up, right? So the first thing I wanna do is open this up. If you do not have one of these, which, okay, maybe many of you do not, you can actually just paint the 19, right? This will just allow it to drip naturally, plus this stuff is naturally glossy. It will look different than the other paint, so I like that, okay? So I'm gonna put the 19, I'm gonna have this at a slight angle when I do so, right? I'm gonna squeeze this a tad, make sure enough ink is coming out, and let's see. I want more ink coming out. What's going on? There we go. There we go. Oof. There. You ask and you receive, right? So I'm tilting this up. Let's see if we can get this. And it's just dripping off the side. Now I can stop that by wiping it and then turning it like this. And then I only have one drip. Is that okay? I don't know. Do we want another drip? We do. So how are we going to do this? I'm going to bring this trash can closer to me. This will happen off camera. But I'm going to push this against the board at the bottom of the one, let it drip. And then I have it next to the trash can, right? Oof, and it dripped like 3-4 places. Good thing I had the trash can right here. So, let's wipe this. And let's wipe that. Now, mind you, this is a different type of paint and a different type of alcohol. I'm going to put the tape under here to raise it because I want to hit it with the heat gun and try to dry it as quick as possible. Now, this is, I think there's alcohol in this, right? So be careful hitting it with heat. I don't know if you saw that. Probably not. But right here, I had the gun there wiggling for a little bit and it started to bubble. That's the paint burning, right? Or maybe the binder, which I think has something to do with alcohol. I looked on these markers to look to see what they're made out of. It doesn't say. But probably there's alcohol in there from the smell of it. So, anyway, as you can see, this is not totally dry. It matters only a little bit because if we wipe down here, do we still have some paint? Let's see. No. It only matters because when I paint the character on, if I touch my hand in this, I am going to move the paint. So let's make sure we put the cover back on this thing, right? And again, you don't need this marker. You could just paint on a 19. You could paint on drips, etc. It's just going to look different with this, and this is pretty quick. This didn't come out as good as the other 19s, but that's because it wasn't dripping anyway. So, next, we are going to take the design, right? I have it right here, this paper. And we are going to, we're not going to trace it. We're going to do this by eye. I have a pencil here, right? And it is it's an 8B. An 8B is pretty dark charcoal pencil. So when I sketch this on, I should be able to see it. It may be difficult for you in the camera to see, but I will pick it up, let you look. And it's just to give me a general idea. So when I start laying paint, I know where it's going to go. And I don't totally do the paint without an idea, right? So I just need to be careful. This still is wet a little bit. But let's paint this guy. What I want to do is do quite a big circle. I did him pretty big last time. I'm doing him a little bit smaller this time. But let's bring the side of him here. There are tools that you can get so you can draw perfect circles. But we're not worried about perfection here. We're just more or less trying to draw somewhat good circle. This is going to come around here. And this comes down to his mouth, right? And his mouth comes in like that. And about out. Next, down here, the bottom part of the circle is going to come around, right? And now I think this will come somewhere around there, right? Now we have space for his tongue. Let's put the tongue in. The tongue maybe starts at about here. And I'm going to draw it coming down. And this tongue is kind of like a split tongue, so I'm going to just draw one of the pieces. And this comes here. And maybe like this. Coming into the border, I think that's kind of cool. You don't have to do that. I like that, so I'm doing it. Next, we're going to draw this other piece of his tongue. It comes here. Then maybe it comes like this. Something like that. Okay, next we want to add some teeth. Or actually, we'll just paint in the teeth. We don't need to add them. We're going to draw the eyes in. Maybe even make them a little bit bigger, like this. His proportions are much different from last time, but again, I'm not worried about that. This is not. I'm not trying to necessarily make a duplicate of the other one. I'm just trying to make a fun guy. Even though COVID's not fun, I'm trying to have fun with it by painting this character. So we've got his eyeballs, we've got the eyes. Now we have these spikes that go around him. Over here, there's like a bottom lip here. Maybe this comes like this, and it comes like that, right? Next, let's start with a spike here. I don't know if this is a male or female character. It could be either, right? But if it is female, then these next, I don't know what you would call these things. Nodules, lumps. What would you call these? Lovely lady lumps, nodules, protrusions. I don't know. So why don't you tell me in the comments? But we are going to alternate between spikes and these protrusions. So next is we're going to put a spike. We are also going to change the size of them. Some of them will be taller and skinnier. Some of them more boxy like that one. Some of them more round. Now notice they're all stopping at this edge. That's okay because when we paint, we're going to bring some of them in with the paint, right? So here we'll put another one and this one. Maybe one side is bigger than the other side. That's cool. The differences make it interesting. If they're all uniform, I don't think that looks as nice. So here we're going to come out into the edge right there. We're going to draw next a spike. Next we're going to draw another lovely lady lump or nodule. Next a spike. Next to nodule, lady lump, I don't know. And then a spike. And then maybe one last nodule, right? Boom. So there are spikes and nodules inside of him. I'm going to leave them for now just so we can get painting on this guy because we can come back to that. Also, we didn't do the teeth yet, but that's because we're just going to eyeball them, right? I have a number 2 round brush right here. I think that's a good size to do the teeth. I have a habit, let me put this down, I have a habit of putting the brush in my mouth while I'm putting paint on the palette. It just makes it faster and anyways, now I'm sharing too much, right? So I'm going to put the brush inside the water, pick up a little water, remove the excess water, come over here, and I'm going to load my brush by putting it in the paint, spinning it around, right? Picking up a little bit more water, coming back over. Now this brush is loaded with paint. I should be able to come in here and do the teeth. So I'm going to put the first tooth here. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect because we are going to outline everything later. Now white is just like black in the sense that it is an opaque color. When you paint it over something, if that something is dry, it should cover it quite a bit, right? And like I said, this doesn't have to be perfect. Because if, for example, this is too far, like the tooth is too fat here at the tip, that's fine. We're going to fix that when we outline it. Because the back part of his mouth is going to be black, the outline is going to be black, easy to fix. We'll add one more tooth over here. And you can always see if you need to add some water, if the paint is not moving easily on the canvas, then add a little bit of water to your brush, right? So I'm being careful with my hand, right, because I'm left-handed, about that blue paint from the 19 that's dripping. So add a little bit more paint. We'll come over here. We are going to paint the outside of his eyes, or the inside of his eyes, the outside. When I lay my brush down, if for example I come here and I place it, I find the tip of the eye, and then I turn it. Just by turning the brush, I can make the bristles do what I want them to do. You don't just have to pull paint like this. You can push and turn and wiggle your wrists and drop it like it's hot, right? Oh, my sense of humor. It's funny to me, by the way. It's not always funny to other people. So it's better you learn this now. Actually, usually I make people laugh, but I think life is too short not to laugh, and you should find every opportunity you can to make light of things and laugh and smile. And I think that's the best way to enjoy life, right? And to paint. So we're coming around here. We're not worried about being perfect. I'm not laying on a lot of paint, mind you, which means it's going to dry faster when I hit it with the heat gun, or even if I didn't hit it with the heat gun, it would dry faster. And we started with the white because when we put black, we're not worried about cleaning the brush that much because the black will overpower the white easily. All right. So This is not perfect right here, this line. I could come back in here and keep playing with it, but the more you play with it, probably the more you will end up screwing up that line. So I'll just leave it. I'll come over here, I'll wiggle it around inside this vat of water. I'll take a paper towel, I'll wipe the brush a little bit, and I'll come back and I'll grab some black paint, right? Now this black paint, what we're going to do is we're going to do a couple things. We're going to do the eyeballs, right? And again, I'm not worried about being perfect here because we're going to outline this. Now, if we weren't going to outline it out, my approach would be a little bit different. And I'll make sure I do tutorials like that also, where you see which approach we take when you're not worried about or when you don't have the luxury of outlining. So that's pretty good. And if his eye is not perfectly round or something, again, we're going to outline it. But even if it wasn't, right? This is not a real life creature. This is our made up COVID-19 character. So he can look however we want, right? He could have one eye. In fact, I challenge one of you, make this painting with one eye. Why does he need two, or she, right? Maybe it will look more legit with one eye. So again, we come down in here. I may have even gone a little bit too far right there. Maybe not far enough right there. Picked up some white paint there by accident, but it's okay. Again, we are going to outline it. So I'll take some black paint here. I did not paint where his mouth starts and stops, but let's say somewhere around here. Comes in. Now there's already black paint there. I don't really have to hit it with too much paint or even any because there's already black paint there. So I'll just come up in here, come over there. Take the corner of his mouth. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. And I have quite a bit of paint on my brush. You need to be careful, right? I know that this fat amount of paint on my brush, I still know how to work with it like that, but you could come over here to the palette, twirl the brush around to remove it, and now I can just get the paint on the tip of the brush. That makes it easier to work with the paint. However, the more you get used to your brushes, the more you get used to painting with paint in different scenarios and etc., the more you can get away with being lazy. So by me like leaving tons of paint on the brush like that, it was just me being lazy. It wasn't a technique, it wasn't whatever, but I also know how to use the brush and I also know how to fix my mistakes, right? So that's why I don't worry about it so much. I suppose one of the things, let's clean this brush. One of the things that, as if you're a beginning artist, now granted, I'm sure some of you watching this are longtime artists, some are just starting out, but if you're starting out, one of the biggest challenges for me, and I think for every artist, is to let go of perfection. Perfection is silly. It doesn't really have a place in art. If you worry about something, you overwork it, you end up killing it, you know what I mean? So don't worry about perfection. Just worry about being creative, laying down your lines, doing your fills, and then fixing things that you screw up on, right? So now we've got the eyes, we've got the teeth, let's get the tongue. The tongue is gonna be red, right? And I think for that, we are gonna use this angle brush. We could actually use the flat brush right there I have, but I think we'll use the angle. And the reason for that is because the flat one we are going to use yellow on. Actually, we already have some red paint here, so let's just make sure this is a little bit wet. Get the excess water off. We'll take this red paint here. We'll come here. Now, if we look at this paint bottle, you see right here this square that has half filled and half not filled. That means it's semi-opaque. It means that it's not, when you paint it on, you can still see through a little bit below, depending on how thick you lay it on, etc. We are not so worried about that at the moment. If you paint this on and you realize you can see below, don't just keep going over it, right? Because what you'd want to do, if you want to make this a solid color, then you can do one of two things. You can either A, paint this on, wait for it to dry, give it another coat, that should really fill things in, or what you can do is mix it with a paint color that is more opaque. Now that's going to change the color, right? Oof, a little bit thick right there, which is going to cause drying issues, but okay. I'm going to come down here, turn the brush. Now realize I'm just turning my brush, right? Like this. It's not like I just keep going in one straight path or something like that. So it may even be useful for you to take a canvas or a canvas board and just start practicing doing certain types of lines or curves with your brush, right? Brush control is very important. So, and this brush is actually worn out. It's not the best brush to use because it's not able to make that fine point right there, or at least it's quite difficult to do so. So, I am not worried about making sure that this color is solid, because what we are going to do is we are going to let this dry with the heat gun. I'm going to leave this in my hand because I'm still going to use it. All right, so let me show you real quick. You see his tongue, you can see through it, right? And that's okay, right? However, why don't we change it up a little bit? I'm going to take the red paint that's currently in this brush. I'm going to bring it over here and I'm going to put it down on the palette, and I'm going to grab just a little bit of black paint and I'm going to mix that into this red that I pulled, and we are going to have a darker shade of that red paint, right? And maybe a little bit more. There we go. And with this darker shade, what I'm now going to do, if I can pull some of this paint off the brush and just have it on the tip, is we are going to accent this tongue, right? So if I come over here, I'm going to accent the tongue in certain places, right? So you don't have to do this. It just will give it a more interesting look by having multiple tones in your colors. All right, so clean the brush inside here. Let me show you what we did, right? Just different tonalities, right? And we were still not worried about going all the way through. As far as the lines being perfectly even, clean, whatever, we're not worried about that because we are going to outline this. I'll hit it with the heat gun one more time. So this yellow paint that I have is semi-opaque, right? Which means that if we paint it on, you could see below. So we have two options. We can obviously say, hey, no biggie. Or we can mix it, like I said, with an opaque color and then make sure we see less through, right? I'm gonna take this brush right here. This is a number 2 flat. And I'm gonna take some of this white, just a little bit, put it here on this palette and mix it with some yellow, right? If I do that, it's going to take the opaque properties of the white. Of course, it's going to make this yellow lighter, right? So you have to be okay with that, but it's also going to make it, let's take a little bit of water, but it's going to make it so you can see less through, right? So anyways, we're not worried about being perfect. I'm just getting close to the edges on things, and I'm going to come in here, get next to his mouth, and I'm going to mix by using some of the paint that's mixed with the white and some of the paint that's not, and I'm going to come down here. There we go, that's pretty close, or that is right next to the edge. We're going to come down here, and again, I'm not worried about being too perfect. If I go out of the lines or whatever, it's okay, because still, I think, number one, you might be able to fix it by adding the outline, or you can just say, who cares that you went outside the lines, right? Because this is a painting made by a person, and people are not perfect in what they do. I know when you colored when you were a child, the idea was to stay in the lines, but you know, some people's painting style is not in the lines, right? So I think I wouldn't worry about that so much if you're just starting out. And even if you're not, maybe that even means you worry less, because painting with emotion, with purposeful brush strokes, is, I think, more important than worried about whether you are in the lines, right? So again, I'm just going to go through this. Now we are going to layer up his skin tone, or the color of his body, so you can see through this yellow in many places, right? Again, I'm not worried about it, because what we're going to do is layer this up with different things. We're going to add some browns in there, some reds. When I say browns, I mean one brown, and when I say reds, I mean one red, but again, you know, like you can get to the level of detail you want when you paint. Like maybe I use one brown and one red. You could do 4 browns, right? The more tone that your painting has, the more layers it has, I think the more interesting it looks like in the end. So right now, again, I'm going around him. I'm getting close to the eyes or right next to him. Doesn't have to be perfect. We are going to outline it, but we want it to more or less cover him, right? And again, the way I decided to paint him also gave room for us to have some freedom in not being perfect. So, and when I say not perfect, I'm going to pick this up after I finish painting him yellow and show you how you can see through underneath. But also that kind of looks cool. It gives him some extra texture, right? So, now using this flat brush in certain areas, like for example around the eyes, it would be easier to switch brushes. However, like I said, it's important to have some level of brush control. You probably can also see is my brush is too loaded with paint. So what I should do is come here, press down, get rid of that extra paint and move it to the tip. So I was trying to come up with a witty joke right there. That's what she said. Sometimes, you know, you just are at a loss. I'll tell you this, painting and talking the whole time is really interesting. I mean, I don't know if it's a skill I've had in the past, but I think that's the biggest challenge, is to be able to be talking about this, keep it somewhat interesting, and then keep going, right? While remembering what I need to do and maybe what I should do next and blah, blah, blah. So, how are you guys coping with your lockdown? Are you painting? Are you alone? Are you with loved ones? I think for me, one of the big challenges is that I live alone. And first of all, I like to live alone, so let's get that out there. But it is quite challenging to be alone for this amount of time with no human contact. You haven't hugged anyone, you haven't done anything, right? That's kind of crazy. So let me grab a little bit more white, bring this over here into the yellow. Get rid of some of the extra paint that's there, and let's start painting the spikes and nodules, right? And I'm trying not to, there's some places that you can see here that are much thicker than others, right? Those thicker places will take longer to dry. Again, whenever you put layers down or whatever and you need it to dry, you could go watch TV, you could do the dishes, you could start your laundry, etc., and then come back, the paint's dry, and then move to the next step. You don't have to use a heat gun. In fact, more times than not, I don't use a heat gun because I prefer the way paint dries without. So, come over here, come like that, and again, it doesn't have to be perfect. You'll notice I'm just smushing that paint blah, like that, trying to remove that excess. It doesn't even have to be perfect. This is not exactly how it's drawn below, and that's okay. Like I said, we're outlining it, right? Like I've said like 50 times. You guys are like, all right, I got it. I got it. All right. You guys got to give me feedback, right? Is my humor too corny? Is it not enough? Do I talk too much? What is the speed in which I'm talking? That's that will be interesting, is to see, is make sure that I have like a good tempo, right? Because I noticed the first time I did this, it seemed like I was rushing. And I don't know if it's not about being nervous. It's just about trying to say the right things, keep you guys interested, because technically this is boring if I didn't speed it up, which I think the only parts I'll speed up are the parts with the hairdryer. So, hairdryer, the heat gun. You could use a hairdryer, by the way. Some people use hairdryers instead of heat guns, and I think a heat gun provides more uniform heat, and unless you're using a nice hairdryer. Now look right here, I used a extra white, and that looks different than the other pieces, and that's okay, right? Again, we are not, this is not a perfection thing. This is a let's get it done thing. So I can speed this up a little bit, maybe. We are spending too much time doing something that, again, I think is like this doesn't have to be perfect, because we're going to add some other colors on top of it. here, hit that like that. Come here, maybe some white. Here, here. All right, so this is really going to come together when we hit it with the outline. Then you'll say, oh yeah. So now certain places, like where we had painted before, is much drier. So if we're careful about how we drag paint across it, we can even layer the paint on top of the already almost dry paint and make it a little bit more opaque, which is what I'm doing right here. Especially in the parts of this brush that have excess paint. Just laying that in there. And bam, bam, bam. Like Emerald Lagasse of painting, right? Now if we come in here with the white, we can even do that. Put some white in this brush and pull the white in on this guy. And this adds more dimension, right? By having different tones, especially if we're using lines that make sense in the contour of his body, right? There's a technique called cross-hatching and hatching, where you draw lines in the direction of the movement, and that creates the illusion of depth. So here we go. Let's see. This is what we were working with so far, right? Looking good. Let's get this dry. Let's dry the brush, and then let's add some red inside of him, right? All right, this paint for sure is not dry yet, but this is a good point to make, right? Is what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some brown in there. Let's use the angle tip brush. So wipe it around in there a little bit, get the paint, hopefully most of it off. Whoa, not even close. But we're going to use red, so it's okay because there was red on this brush anyway, right? So there we go. This paper towel is quite moist now. Throw it away. We have a little bit of red paint here. I think that might be enough. This paint, where it's still wet, is going to mix with the paint that I laid down. I'm just going to take a little bit of water, come here, dab, 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 dab. Even if we pick up that darker, it's fine. And actually, I'm doing this in the reverse of what I did before. And that's, ooh, we've picked up too much black. But okay, now we've added another color, right? Oops. So what I'm doing is, before I used the brown to make these little smudges. And notice, I'm just like pa, 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 right? Like a ninja turtle, almost, right? Not exactly. How many of you remember the Ninja Turtles, right? So we've got different tonalities on this red. We've got darker, we've got lighter. And each time, at no point, see, I just pick up the red right there. It's much brighter. It's because I'm not cleaning the brush, but it's on purpose, right? Because I want it to just kind of flow. One color, another color, who cares? Let's make it crazy. Come around the side of his face. We're going to come up in there. Now, I should probably be careful not to get in his eyes, otherwise we have to repaint that white if we really want to fix it, which we don't, so let's not. But, all right, something like this, right? Now we've got red in there. So I'm going to clean this brush, and then let's get some browns. But we want to dry it a little more, and the idea of drying it is that the paint doesn't mix, right? Because when the paint is wet, it mixes with other paint, but when it's dry, you're putting paint on top of other paint, and it should not mix, right? So I'm gonna take the heat gun. All right, to provide some difference, right? Using the same brush all the time, you can tell when you look at a canvas or a painting that always uses the same brush. So let's switch to the round, right? I'm going to wipe some paint off of here. I'm going to take some purple and put it next to the yellow, because again, we are going to try to make that brownish color. Probably didn't need that much, but all good in the hood. And you notice that there's a bunch of black here, but not in other places. Let's see how it looks in a little bit, and we decide if we do anything there, right? So I'm gonna come here, bring some of this purple here, bring some of this yellow there. Let's mix it here. Maybe a little more purple, ba, ba, ba. All right, so take some of that excess off. Bring some water into the mix. All right, so turn the brush a bit. And now we are going to come in here and we are going to add some of this dirty color, right? The brownish, And we're putting over the red, for example, where it's dry, it gives it more layered look, more texture, more etc. And what I did before, which we didn't do this time, and I'll explain it, it doesn't mean this way was right or the other way, it's that I just didn't do it, I didn't think of it, is that here where we added some nodules or spikes inside the body, I drew them out before I did this stuff. That way I didn't go over lines that were going to be there in black. And so because we didn't do that, it's up to us whether we add those interior nodules or not. But if we do, we may hit it again with color. I'm not sure yet. Let's see. So again, we're just picking up some of this color, coming down. Cool. And voila. So this is where we're at. I think that looks kind of cool. Let's do this. Let's clean this brush a bit and let's add some more blacks in there. Because I think after that, it doesn't look balanced to me. I would like to see some blacks. Again, the brush doesn't have to be that clean because black is a super powerful color and will beat up the other colors and take its place, right? So let's, actually, these marks I made inside this painting here, I did with a Posca marker. Let's paint them in instead. How about that? So, your lines are going to be cleaner with the Posca marker. I'm going to outline them in the Posca, but I'm going to do the interior lines with a brush, right? Just to show you that option, especially if you don't have Posca markers. Of course, it's possible. I'm not worried about being perfect with the lines that come up in here, right? Or, for example, here we have a line that should outline his cheek like this, right? Next, down here underneath his lip, I'm trying to find a place to put my pinky. When you paint, if you use your pinky or your knuckle or something to rest your hand, it allows you to have a smoother movement, right? So let's try to thin this paint out right there a tad. So maybe something like this. And then maybe come over here, pick up a little bit of water, a little more paint, and we'll paint this. Something like that. Next, let's get that nose in there, right? This dude had a nose. So how did we make the nose? A little half circle with a line. Pick up a little bit more paint. There we go. Come on. Come on, paint. Listen to me. You can do it. Let's add some movement lines right here. Come on, baby. Maybe that's a little bit thick. One of the benefits of using the Posca, you have a lot more simplistic control over line thicknesses, you know, but with a paintbrush, you have to have a delicate touch. And right now I'm I don't know, rushing, but I'm a little quicker right now, which is not giving me the same level of control. If you look at how thick this is right here, I can come here and I can be a lot more gentle in creating a thinner line. Right? If you also look, there's too much water there, which is what creates that that watered look, right? So I can hit it with a little bit more paint, or I could leave it. Who cares, right? Because it's not that who cares. Maybe that's not the right word. But we want to just keep flowing right now. This is a very flow painting. What we're trying to do is get some lines in there that make sense to us and move forward, right? So come here, bop, bop, And this one will make like a jagged dots, cool. This one maybe lines up like so. Bring some water into the mix here. And this one I made much thinner because difference is good. Now, cool. Maybe I'll leave out the nodules and stuff that's in his body. Instead, what I'm gonna do is take some of this black paint, some of this water, and we're just gonna put some craziness in him, right? Just to add some weird, maybe some little dots right here, maybe up here. We didn't give him eyebrows like we did before. That's okay, you could. But also his eyes are much higher than they were before. We're gonna leave it here, right? So I'm gonna clean the brush, or at least put it inside this water. Hit it with the heat gun one more time. All right, so I left the heat gun for a little bit there because I want it to be dry because we're gonna outline it. I'm gonna sign it real quick over here in the corner. And help if I had a little extra space, but all good. The year of 2020, papa. Couple dots for fun. Close the marker. Now I have a Posca here that I will use for the outline. We need to make sure that edges of things are relatively dry. They are, more or less, right? If we run into problems, we shall see. Is this dry? Yes. So let's start with the tongue. I'm going to come here, and when you are with a brush or with a marker, it is good to make singular lines. Like come as far as the movement will stop. Bringing my wrist down wouldn't have made that movement strong further, because when we come back to this line, we might retrace the line a little bit above, but we want it to look like it wasn't two lines, and you can see where the marker touches here because it's not perfect. So ideally you want to try to make these lines one continuous line, right? So we're going to stop here only because I can then outline the nodule, which will then affect that, right? I'll come here. I could have used a smaller Posca to outline this, but we are rebels, yo. Rebels. All right, so the tongue is coming along quite nicely. We're going to turn this around. And feel free to move your canvas around to suit. Now I screwed up here. I guess it's better me than you, right? When you press down on a Posca marker, it lays out more ink. We are going to leave that there for that ink to dry. We could come here. The problem is the heat gun puts out air too. So if it is too close to it, it's going to push that ink all around. So I'll just hit it a little bit. It's not going to dry it, so let's leave it right there and let's outline more of them and come back to this, right? But this is going to be a screw up. We're not going to fix it, and that is what makes art art, guys. So I'll come here and I'll hit the teeth. We're going to give him pointier edges. We're going to come on the inside of his mouth. No pun intended. And we are going to curve up here all the way up. And yes, I am going over parts that are black paint. Why? Because I want that crisp edge of the line, right? We are going to come down on this side on the top of his mouth. There we go. This part here of his upper lip. This tooth here, coming like that. We are going to do the eyes, and there's a thick part of paint right here, so I'm going very soft just in case it's not fully dried all the way through on this part of the yellow paint. I went soft with the marker so that I didn't squish the paint underneath and cause it to explode out the sides, right? Now another thing you'll notice is that the eyeball is not perfect there. I'm going to hit the eyeball with the outline too to make the edges of the eye even better, right? Boom. This one too. Now hopefully third time's a charm. You guys get to see this full video. If you don't, I'm going to throw all of these into a bonfire and go crazy probably. Now, when we're coming in, we're doing the outline here for the spikes and the nodules. This one I'll leave in the edge, right? In fact, the first couple I might. But I'm going to show you something to provide. See right here, the paint is a little thick, so I'm just going to dab on top. This one I will do the same, but then the next one I will show you how we will make it look a little more 3D. So, these have all been on the edge of his, the roundness of his body. But this one we can go in by bringing the marker here to show that this starts further down than the top, right? So just by doing these little things, we give the illusion of another dimension to our piece, right? So we're going to skip that with this spike. We'll do it with the next one. We'll come here. Maybe this piece will come like this. And this one, that means it started further in as well. This spike will then come in like this. And by making it rounded there, it shows that it starts further into his body, right? Or hers. I keep calling it a him. Maybe it's because I'm a guy. I don't know. What do you guys think? Is this a girl or a boy virus? Debate in the comments. All right. And again, maybe this one starts a little bit further in, or both sides. We won't even curve it. And see, I came up too far here, right, with the marker, away from the paint. That's fine. Let's just add a little bit more black marker there to fill it in, right? Don't worry about these mistakes. In the end, if I show you this painting, you may not even notice some of these. Most people are not going to notice your mistakes. The person who notices your mistakes is you. You know, if you look at all of my paintings, I know where all my mistakes are, you know, and most people will look at it, they won't see any of them. It's just a reality. So don't really worry about that stuff. And anyway, how do they know if you did that on purpose or you did it by accident, right? So we're getting closer to being done outlining. It's still wet, looks like over there. That's okay. I'm going to hit this edge with a little bit of black. We are going to come here. And we even kind of made this point blunt, right? Why? I don't know, because why not? We're going to turn that in like that. I'm going to re-go over this, even though I hit it with that just to make it darker with the brush. I am going to take the outside of his mouth there and the top part of his tongue. We're going to draw that line. There we go. Come down. Let's come on this side, and we are almost finished. Now let's give it a look, see what I'm missing where. It looks like we got the outline, right? It looks like this guy is one wild and crazy dude. I mean, we could be done. Now, could you do more, right? What if you said, hey, I want to kick this up a notch? What could you do? I mean, I suppose inside the 19, you could add some effects, like with some black marker or paint or different color, etc. I like that it's slightly abstract. You don't obviously see the 19 right away, or maybe you do. And I like the balance of the piece. I don't know if this blue was the right color. Probably should have went with, excuse me, red. Maybe green would have been okay. The blue probably wasn't the right color. But otherwise, I like it. What do you guys think? Let me see if I can get this in frame properly. Let's see. Is this good? Something like that. I will put a picture up. It is not dry right here. It's okay. I'm not turning this on its side. So, guys, I hope you like this tutorial. Please give me some feedback. How was my pacing for the tutorial? Did I speak at a good pace? Were my jokes amazing? What did you think about the techniques? Did I explain them enough? Etc., etc. I have an idea for a few more tutorials, but also, what would you like to see, right? So I'm gonna do something on fluid pours or fluid acrylic, liquid acrylic stuff. Somebody asked me about that already, so I will do a couple videos on that, but what else would you like to see? Guys, I hope you liked the tutorial. Until next time, I'm out.